Hello and welcome to my presentation on ability scores in D&D 5th edition and how the primary method of ability score generation shakes out when compared to the other two methods. First, let's talk about how ability scores affect your modifiers and what even we are talking about. Your ability scores are these tiny little numbers down here that we barely think about unless we are either creating a character or it is time for that sweet ability score improvement. If you total them all up, you can get a kind of major sense of how capable your character is in total, and generally we end up with an array from a low amount to a high amount because playing with a perfectly capable character is actually really boring. If you've ever tried it, I don't recommend it. Now, how do you get ability scores? There are three ways. First, you have the primary way in which you roll 4d6, you drop the lowest roll, you sum up the remaining 3d6, and then you do that 6 more times, and you have an array of ability scores that you can then apply to your character's statistics. The point-buy method is, to quote the player's handbook, you have 27 points to spend on your ability scores. The cost of each ability score is shown on the ability score cost table. For example, a cost of 14 costs 7 points, unquote. Thus, any one ability score can be between 8 and 15 with this method. Finally, we have the standard array, which gives you an 8, a 10, a 12, a 13, a 14, and a 15, and that's all. If you want anything between that, I don't know why you chose standard array unless that's what your GM decided to give you, which, valid. But let's go back to that primary ability score. If this were simply a 3d6, we would instead have we have a 3 to 18 range, and that distribution looks like this. A not super great distribution for an adventurer because this would essentially be the average. You would have some things you're kind of good at, some things you're kind of bad at, and it's pretty unremarkable. And Wizards of the Coast said, let's do a little bit better. And they came up with this. This is what happens when you take 4d6, drop the lowest, and then add it to like 100,000 times of doing that, because that's how many times I did it, because math is amazing and computers are wonderful. So that's how I got this beautiful distribution. And you can see here that we have a higher chance of getting the higher probabilities and a lower chance of getting the less desirable ability scores. In a simpler method, we can see that the modifiers, we have a 1.6% chance of getting a 4 and a less than that chance of getting a -4 or -3, which is pretty desirable. Furthermore, we have just over 1/4% chance, mixing my numbers, but whatever, of getting a 1, and a decent chance next to that of getting a 0 or 2. This is a much more preferable outcome for adventurers because you are generally better than average, which is mostly what we're kind of looking to feel when we're playing Dungeons & Dragons. But this can be kind of hard to conceptualize and think about, so I did that thing I did with the other thing and ran over at least 100,000 probabilities and loops of Python and came up with what these standard arrays actually shake out to. See, compared to the standard array, which is 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, and modifiers into -1, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, we can see here, as these are the most common results when using the primary method of ability score generation, we end up with arrays of ability scores that are similar to the standard array, at least as far as modifiers are concerned. As such, we have that -1, 0, 1, 1, 2, and either a 2 or a 3. Very preferred, very enjoyable. But if we want to get a more global look at this, a more big picture idea, we can add all of the ability scores up, and we end up with this kind of breakdown of how each method shakes out. So with the point buy method, you can get anywhere between 69 and 75 total ability score points, depending on how you distribute them. The standard array totals out to 72, which, if you didn't notice, is the average of the point buy method. And when comparing to the primary method, you have a 38% or just above-ish, 1/3, honestly closer to 4/10. I'm getting too specific. Ignore me, except don't ignore me. Keep listening to me. Enjoy the sound of my voice. Moving on. The 72 total, you have a just over 60% chance of getting at least as good as the standard array, if not better. If you were to, let's say, play Dungeons & Dragons competitively, you would likely want to go with the primary method over the point buy or standard array if you really want to take a chance on getting a super good character. Or maybe you like to shake it up and play wildly and chaotically, in which case you also would want to go with the primary method. If you're maybe a lot more lawful neutral character, will end up with a standard array. Huh, did you think of that? Maybe the point buy characters are the neutral characters. Who knows? But maybe that says more about your players than you or your DM. Either way, the greater your ability score total, the more capable, the less capable, and you can now go out into the world with this knowledge and think about it that way. Thank you so much for being here and listening to me. In the comments, I would love to hear about what your primary preferred method of ability score generation is. Do you prefer the rolling of the d6 and the chaoticness of this? Is my hypothesis that more neutral players will end up with maybe the point buy method or standard array being used by players who more personally align themselves with lawful good characters, ending up with a standard array? I would like to know. I'm now very curious about a random thing, and I hope I don't end up thinking about this forever and needing to answer this question in my free time, because how would I figure that out? Anyways, roll that subscribe button, like this video if you enjoyed it. If you didn't like it, I hope you still have a good day. And thank you for being here. Goodbye.